Good evening. Evening. This time we again have a confusing time set for this lecture. The Zoom session, the Zoom lecture was set at 8 or at 6. And as far as I know, the lecture time is 6:10. So from the quantity of students here, I believe that 6:10 is correct time. So I will pause now and will return at 18:10. Good evening again. Just to double check, is the time for the lecture that you know is 6:10? Could somebody answer?
Good evening. Uliana usually sends us email, and the time is 6 p.m.
6.
Yeah.
Looks strange. Okay, so the time is 6:60.
Yes, on our email, yes.
Oh, okay. Just because we started at with lectures at 6:30, then she sent me information that the time changed to 6:10, and now I have 6:0 in Zoom, and she doesn't respond to my questions. Okay, let's begin then. Although from the number of students, I can guess that some people maybe believe it's 6:30 still. Well, it doesn't matter. Some issues about your models. By now, I've seen maybe 6 to 7, maybe 8 models, and I have like 30 of you in the list, right? Let me check it. Yes, it's 31 students, and those models I've seen have a lot of problems and things to do, even for the parts completed in the model. So please, if you didn't send me your model, if you haven't started yet, please do it as quick as possible, because we will really need some interaction to make your models decent and to get a good mark at the end of the course. So please don't postpone it and start working with your models. Yes, you not it's not just you can send uncompleted models. You must do it. Do it as early as possible. When you finished some part of the model, send it to get feedback for the part you've finished already, to start discussion of the model. Because if you did something wrong in the beginning of the model, and you will know that yes, parts of the model. This is exactly what the other students do. They send like for example, just assumptions sheet, or just some part with draft financial report and without all the other parts, and so on. And this is important, because if you made something wrong with your assumptions, for example, and then you build on those assumptions, you build your financial reports, your analysis, and so on and so on. That will be very disappointing for you when you will know that you will have to change something in the assumptions, and because of that, you will change a lot in the reporting and analysis in the model. So send any part of the model you want to discuss. You have completed maybe some part of the model, but start it as early as possible. Okay, our topic for today is financing our project. And although the basic principle of financing a project usually pretty simple. We have a lot of things to take into account. So today, I will do it not the same way as I did it last time and during our first lectures. I will build my my part of the model for financing live here, because we will need to discuss formulas and discuss some things. And I will start actually not with the model. Let me, for the beginning, run through a brief presentation. 1 second. Okay. Well, what can we do to finance the project? And how we finance projects usually? For most projects, the first step, actually for all projects, the first step is to calculate our financing requirements, to see how much money we actually need. And to do that, we will have to build our financial reports. And that's why I, in my comments to some models, to those who send me your models, I asked some of you to wait with your loans and generally your finance until you have complete and standard financial reports. So the first step for us is to model our assumptions on the project, then to build financial reports, and the more standard are your financial reports, the better, the easier will be your work with financing that project. Then when you have these financial requirements of the project, when you see, for example, that you need something like 1 billion rubles or $10 million to finance that project, you will use some mix of equity and debt to finance the project. And usually for most projects, we think about something between like 25% of equity and three-fourths of debt to finance the project. This is a pretty risky schedule for the project, but it's a very popular approach. Or maybe it's half equity, half debt. And you can see that if you compare this approach to what you expect from a working acting company, from an ongoing business, in an ongoing business, you expect that equity in the balance sheet of this company is equal or more than greater than debt for this company. And this is usually an indicator that we have a healthy, stable business. In projects, we usually get more debt than is okay for an ongoing business, because at the moment when we finance a new capital investment, we raise some debt that we expect to repay during the project. So on average, during the project, from the beginning to the end of the project, we will still have this normal mix of equity and debt, where debt is a bit less than equity, but we start with a lot of debt, and by the end of the project, we have zero debt in that project. right? And this is the difference between a company's financial model and a project's financial model. And we will see during today's lecture that this is not the only difference. Because of these differences in the capital structure, some analytical methods we use to analyze a company will not work for a project. And we will use a different approach for the project, not the same as for the company. Well, with this, as I said, with this approach, we have higher financial leverage for a project, and that creates a higher risk for our project and for our business. But what's interesting is that we don't see this risk when we work with our base case scenario. And that's why later in the next lectures, we will discuss scenario analysis and risk analysis for our model, because there are things in the model that are invisible until we create all possible scenarios for this project. Let's see at this three cases. Imagine that we have a project, and for this project, we are going to finance it with either just equity or with half equity and half debt. This debt will be a loan with 15% rate, or maybe we finance it with 20% equity and 80% of debt. And on these terms, we invest 1,000 of something, of rubles, for example, and we expect that in each period, our project will generate EBITDA. Either, this is scenario one, our base case, 200, or the second case is 100. What's the difference for these three financing schemes? If we finance the project with 100% of equity, we have zero payments to bank. So for the first scenario, we have a return on investments, return on equity, sorry, 20%. In scenario two, we have 10%. If we finance our project with 50% equity and debt, then we get between 25%. This is our base case. So in base case, we will see that the more debt we attract, the higher is return on equity. So the better is the project, the better are all financial indicators for the investor. But in the second scenario, in the lower case, our return on equity is just about 3%, right? The difference between good and bad cases was 10%, now it's 22%. And if we finance this project with 80% of debt, then in the base case scenario, we have 40% return on equity. The project looks excellent, but in the second case, we have losses, and the difference is 42%. So our choice of debt and equity mix is the choice between expected profitability for our base case and the risk that we will see only in scenario analysis, only in the analysis where we calculate some worst case cases for our project. Okay, so this is the general approach we have a mix of equity and debt, and this is a choice between profitability and risk. What is equity and what is debt? Equity for us can be ordinary shares or free cash flow of the company or preferred stock, and debt is like loans, lease, bonds. We can use factoring to finance our working capital. And for our project here, we will use 2 billion rubles of equity. And for our debt, we have the following terms. This debt can be up to 80% of total finance of the project. We will see actually how much of debt we need. Currency will be rubles, interest rate will be 10%, and we will discuss a case when we don't pay interest until the end of construction period. In this case, in the case like this, we will capitalize those interests. Well, the equity part is pretty simple. We have an equity inflow for our model. This inflow will be something that the shareholder invests in the project. And we will show it in our cash flow statement as equity inflow. And then we will show it every period in the balance sheet as the owner's equity. And this is actually the only numbers that we will report in our financial reports. And you should be careful about the idea that equity in our financial model is something that some new shares sold by the company or new shares bought by the investors, because actually in real life our model for the project is not always a model for a legal entity. There can be projects, there can be many projects within one company. We build a model for a project, one project, but around this project, there is a bigger company that have an ongoing business, and the sources of money for the project could be different. That can be actually new equity issued by the company. Those could be assets that invested at the beginning of the project, and we sometimes we present those assets as something that invested as money, and then this money used to buy new assets. But in fact, the investor can transfer some assets, non-monetary assets, into the project. Sometimes that can be cross-financing from other business lines of the same company. That's why in the financial reports, I call it just equity inflow. I don't explain what kind of inflow was that. Was it new equity issued by the company or something else? We will be more abstract on that. Okay, and you can ask me, well, if the shareholder financed that project, this shareholder will probably expect dividends from the investments, and the dividends will be the shareholders' income from this project. That's right, but we will not. And in 99% of project models, we will not model dividends. Why? Because first, dividends don't affect efficiency of the project. Why? Because the efficiency of the project is the efficiency calculated based on what we invested to start this business and what this business earned for us, right? So in the efficiency of the project, we ignore things like loans, what we paid for those loans, equity inflow or outflow of any kind, including dividends, and so on. We focus just on the project, right? This is for the efficiency of our project. And if we calculate efficiency from the shareholder standpoint, yes, we could use dividends, but we don't do that. And that's why. Look at the project where we have just one owner. What happens to the money earned by the project when the company of the project company pays dividend? Financially, I mean, economically, nothing happens, because the owner owns the company and owns all the money on the company's accounts, and the dividend is just a payment from one account owned by the owner of the company to another account. So economically, nothing changes, right? That's why dividend payments for private companies, for companies owned by one or two shareholders, usually change little or nothing, right? And even in a public company, dividends don't change a lot, because if you have a company, if you have shares of the company, and for example, I have, let's say, 100 shares, 100 shares, and the company got profit at the end of the year. So the company has a choice. It can reinvest this profit, and for example, this profit is 5% of its equity. So it can reinvest this profit, and if it reinvests the profit, we expect that after the company got 5% of 5% profit, its value and its the price of its shares will rise 5%, right? Or the company can pay dividend, and let's say this dividend is all those 5%. What will happen? We expect that the price of the shares and the value of the company will not change, but the shareholders will receive those 5%. But what if the company decides not to pay 5% dividends, but I still need those dividends? I can sell 5 shares. If I sell 5 shares of this company, then my portfolio will have the same value as before this company got earned its profit, and I will get 5% of the company's value as my created dividend, right? That's why even public companies usually don't pay dividends linked to its profit. They pay some stable level of dividends so that the shareholders have some free cash for liquidity for their current needs and so on. This is usually something like 2%, 4%, 5%, something about that. And all the other profits are reinvested in the company, reinvested in the business, And if somebody needs more cash from their portfolio, they can sell some shares, creating this synthetic dividends. This is the reason why dividends in financial analysis, in investment analysis, dividends are not important. So we don't model them. And in our financial model, we don't have dividends. Well, okay, but that creates an important thing that you should know about your financial model. If you have a project, and in that project, you decided not to model any dividend, that means that in your model, all cash earned during the project, during 5 or 10 years of the project, will accumulate on the accounts of the company. So you will see that in your financial model, cash at the end of period will grow during the project, will be higher and higher. And because of that, some financial ratios, things like, I don't know, like current ratio or some other ratios based on the balance sheet, will not work in your financial model. So we don't use financial ratios based on current assets and all financial ratios using information about cash within total assets, within current assets, within other parts of the balance sheet. We don't use those ratios in the financial models created for investment projects, because we accumulated cash on our accounts. Well, for equity, we have a couple of other possible options. We can use preferred shares. We will not use them today in the model, but we can use it. And sometimes you can see also that a project is financed with a loan. By that loan comes not from a bank, but from a related part, from a shareholder of the company. Loans like that are usually used to set priorities and claims if the project goes wrong, or for tax planning, for things like that. For our financial analysis, for investment analysis, we will treat them as equity. But for the budgeting, for taxes, they will be like loans. Okay, so this is the equity part of our project. Now the debt. And for that, we usually use loans. To model a loan, we need the following parameters for that loan. First, we need its currency. We need the interest rate. The interest rate, this is a normal thing when the interest rate is changing during the project. It can be fixed. It's popular, but also other possible approaches are, for example, the idea that during the construction period, the interest rate is a bit higher because the risks are higher. After the construction is finished, after we started operations, the interest rate will be a bit lower, or the interest rate can be variable and it can be linked for euro and dollars. It can be LIBOR or Euribor for euro. It can be base rate plus some premium. For Russian ruble, it can be linked to the Bank of Russia key rate. They are not very popular for the investment projects, but sometimes you can get such parameters. Other possible parameters for the loan is any information about the schedule for drawdown and repayment of the loan. This is maybe the most important part of the information of the loan. If you have delayed interest payments, then the information about those delays. This is a rare thing. Maybe in real estate, you can find loans like that with delayed interest payments. But even in real estate, they are not very widespread. And you need information about collateral used for the loans, other possible covenants and terms for the loan, because sometimes for a loan, those additional information is very important for our scenario analysis, just to see what would happen to the project if we walk outside the base scenario, the base case, where we have all those risks. Well, and before we calculate our loans, as I said, we start with complete financial reports. And before we have financial reports, I wouldn't recommend you to start building your financing blocks in the model. But before we start building a loan in our financial model, we will probably need two more parameters. First, and we'll prepare that in our financial model before we model a loan. The first parameter, it's actually more used for ongoing business, to analyze a company, not a project. But still, you have to know what TD to EBITDA ratio your project has, because this is a very important information for the bank. The only thing here is that TD to EBITDA is calculated always for a company, not for one project. If you have a model for a project within a bigger company, then you don't calculate TD to EBITDA based on this project. Well, what TD to EBITDA is? This is TD is total debt. This is total amount of debt received by the company and outstanding debt for now. And EBITDA is our EBITDA, and EBITDA shows us EBITDA actually works as a proxy to free cash flow. So banks and financial analysts use EBITDA in cases where we having the full-blown model of the project, we would use free cash flow line. Simply the EBITDA ratio is more readily available for all companies. So people prefer using EBITDA instead of free cash flow, just to work only with the income statement without all the other financial reports. Well, total debt and our EBITDA. For an ongoing business, we usually say that the ratio in the range less than 3 means that this is a very low debt company, and this is relatively safe for the debt holders. So this company can probably raise more debt. So this is an easy case. Numbers between 3 and 6 are the numbers that show that this is a significant debt for our company. And if this is a number for ongoing business, then we usually draw conclusion that this company has a heavy debt burden, and we should analyze it more accurately and be more cautious about this business. But for the investment project, this number is a normal number for the beginning of the project. So when we invest in a company, when we buy a business, for example, when we buy a business, then at the moment when we buy that business, our TD to EBITDA will be somewhere between 3 and 6 usually. If we create a business, then like in this table, then we will have, of course, a period when we don't have sales, our construction period. And during that construction period, there's no sense in TD to EBITDA ratio. So we don't calculate it at all. Then we usually have some beginning period, like here, the third year of the project, where we have TD to EBITDA like 90. And again, yes, we could technically calculate it here, but it doesn't make much sense still, because this first year is just the beginning of the project. This is not a real size of our business, so we can calculate it. We don't use it in our analysis. And usually the next year after the beginning of the operational phase of the project, we first calculate some sensible number for TD to EBITDA. It's 4 here, and this is that looks like a normal debt burden for a project. Well, and if you have, by the way, if you have more than 6 TD to EBITDA, then this is a very heavy debt burden that looks risky. A company or a project should have some very special features to make that that amount of debt normal, okay for the company. Okay. The other ratio is more important for investment projects and more popular for the projects and for the models. This other ratio is DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. This is a very important ratio, and actually you should never make any model with debt, with a loan, without calculating DSCR, because DSCR is an important parameter to calculate acceptable schedule for the loan repayment. So technically, how we calculate DSCR? We calculate it from our cash flow statement. And again, some of you send me your models where you prepared your own structure of the cash flow statement. And that was a wrong decision. Why? Because any investor who any debt holder, investors who invest debt in your company, will look for information about DSCR, and they will start from your cash flow statement, and they expect that your cash flow statement is as standard as possible. So your cash flow statement should be standard to help your investors to see how you calculated DSCR, where your investments are, and so on. Just like your income statement should be standard to help your investors to see your profitability, your EBITDA ratio, and so on. Well, so we start with the cash flow statement and we do the following. First, we take our cash flow from operations without interest paid. And that shows us how much money we have from the company's operations. Second, we add or subtract. We technically add it, but we have minus sign in front of all of those numbers. So we subtract those investments. We subtract our investments. And as a result, for each period, we have cash available for debt service. So this is what we actually have to know about the business when we used our EBITDA. EBITDA shows us something about the company, shows something about how much money this company has to repay the debt, but the real number is this cash available for debt service, CFODs. Then we calculate DSCR as CFODs over debt service, and debt service consists of loan repayment and interest payments, right? If I have DSCR equal to 1, what does it mean for the bank? For the bank, it means that in my plans, I expect to use all free money earned by the company to repay the debt. Is this approach acceptable for the bank? What's the problem with this approach? Maybe somebody has a comment on that.
Maybe I can comment. So if we use all money to pay our debt, there is not enough money left for growth and business development, which will actually increase the future problems with the debt repayments.
No, that's incorrect. And this is a difference between analyzing a financial report of a company and analyzing a financial model for the project. Look, in our financial model, this is a forecast, right? We forecasted those cash flows. In those cash flows, it was our obligation to forecast all necessary capital expenditure or other reinvestments we need to work with this business, right? So the free cash flow we have is exactly the free cash flow. We don't need this money in our project, because if we have a plan, for example, if I bought a piece of equipment, and I understand that in 3 years I will have to replace this equipment, that means that in my cash flow statement, 3 years from now, I will have capital expenditure to replace this equipment, right? And this capex will reduce my free cash flow. So what I have in my free cash flow is actually free cash. I don't need this cash in my project. But I have another problem with this approach. If my DCR is 1, and you are the bank, you financed my project, you put 50% of the capital needed to start this business. 3 years from now, I have a plan to earn, for example, 1 billion rubles. Then I spend, for example, 500 million rubles for my operating expenses. And then I plan that I will repay 500 million rubles to you, to the bank. This is exactly what I have if my DSCR is 1, right? All cash available for that service, all cash available to pay to the bank, I planned to pay to the bank. But this is not an actual number. This is something that I planned. And now imagine that in 3 years from now, I will earn not 1 billion rubles, but just 1% lower. What would happen? Technically, it will be default, right? Because I put in my plan, in my schedule, and in my contract with the bank, I put all the expected income, right? 1% lower revenue means 1% lower payments to the bank. That doesn't look like a style for interaction with debt holders, with banks, right? They are not shareholders. To get lower income if the project earned a bit less money, this is that's the risk for shareholders, not for the banks. So what the banks expect, they expect that you will have some safety gap. You will leave some money for shareholders, not in real payments, but in your plans, because all our model is just a plan, a forecast. So in our forecast, we have to leave some level of expected income for the shareholders, so that if this project will earn, say, 10% lower income, that would be a problem for the shareholder, not for the bank. That's why the bank expects that you will never pay all free cash flows forecasted in this model to the bank. And that's why this DSCR ratio should be higher than 1. And if you don't know the requirements of the bank, you can start with 1.5 for your projects. If you expect that you will have like stable project with very reliable revenues, you can use something like 1.2. DSCR equal to 1 is possible only when your project is a small project within a bigger company, so that the bank understands that this company has free cash flow, that has own free cash flow from all other businesses and projects. And for this project, this safety gap is created not by the cash in the project, but by the cash flow of the whole company. Only in this case, you can forecast that you repaid your loan with DSCR 1. For all cases where your project is your company, your DSCR should be higher than 1 for each period. But if DSCR in each period is more than 1, what again that means for the project? That means that when we repay the debt, we leave some cash outside of this payment, and at some point you will see maybe a bit strange picture where you still have outstanding debt, but at the same time in your financial model you have cash free cash at accounts of the company, on the company accounts, that's higher than the outstanding debt. And you will, when you see that, you will probably ask why we don't use this cash to repay our debt. Why we still paying interest for this debt if we have cash to repay it immediately? That's because this is not a real number. This is just your forecast. And yes, in your forecast, you have this free cash, but you cannot plan that you use this free cash to repay the debt because of DSCR. Okay, so that's why we always have this a lot of free cash. We don't pay dividend. We don't pay all our money to the bank. So we have this free cash accumulated on our accounts, and we just don't analyze this free cash. We ignore that. We use cash flow, not the cash on our accounts. Well, let's skip these questions about other parameters of the loan. And just this is not our case, but just for a real scenario, a real project, make sure that you took into account all the costs of the loan. And this is not just interest rate. For some loans, you will have mandatory insurance, and those insurance payments will be another part of your loan cost structure. For some projects and some loans, you will have fees like for loan approval, loan service, sometimes it's credit limit fee that you pay for the part of the loan that approved but not used by you at that moment. So make sure that all those possible elements of the cost structure are presented in your financial model. In our model, that will be just interest rate for now. Okay, and sometimes this is not for our model again, but sometimes you can replace some loans with lease and bonds. I'm not going to talk a lot about bonds actually, but for lease, I would like to mention some two things. For the lease, two important things in your model should be taken into account. First, this is more like Russian thing, but maybe if somebody saw that in any other country, you can tell about it. But I saw that only in Russia, and in Russia this is a standard. Leasing companies don't use interest rate to present their terms. Instead, they use like rise in price rate. And the difference between the interest rate and rise in price rate is that rise in price is calculated on top of the whole value of leased asset. So as a result, if your rise in price rate is like 5%, then your actual interest rate is about 10%, something like this. So you should be careful about these things. And another important thing is that if you have lease in your financial model, then unfortunately you cannot use ratios like internal rate of return. Because look, what's the internal rate of return? This is return on our initial investments. And to calculate internal rate of return, we use, as investment, we use CapEx, we use capital expenditure of the company. And we ignore the red part of this cash flow, right? So the investment part with investments financed by a loan, the investment part is our capital expenditure. But if you replace this with a lease, then instead of separate cash flow for your capex and your financing, you have just one cash flow for this lease. And in this cash flow, mixed all your financing and investing cash flows. And until you can get a separated cash flows for your capex and financing, you cannot calculate internal rate of return, just because your revenue and your investments are not separated in time. So any calculation is just senseless, right? So if you have a lease, this is important. You stop using IRR, just because in financial model for a project, you cannot separate those two parts of your cash flows. You just stop using IRR for projects like that. Otherwise, you will always have results like your project is more efficient if you finance it with lease instead of a loan, which is sometimes correct and sometimes not. So with lease payments, with leasing financing in your project, we stop using parameter ratios like internal rate of return. Okay, so that's what I was going to tell about the general idea, and now let's go to the model. One second. So this is the model we had at the end of the last lecture. And we have all financial reports here. We actually have some prepared lines for our financing. They are empty now, but we will fill them with the data now. And but before we start modeling finance for our project, it will be here after tax payments. We can actually put it here. But before we fill anything here, we need, in addition to our financial reports, we need those two analytical ratios, and we'll add them in a new sheet called analysis. For that, I will copy the results sheet, call it analysis. And I need some bank ratios in this sheet. Well, first, let's calculate TD EBITDA. To do that, we first get EBITDA here, EBITDA, total debt, Then we calculate TD over EBITDA. This is a good style, by the way. If you calculate some ratio, it's a good style to repeat the parameters for this calculation so that anybody could easily understand what's used to calculate this ratio. It's just in times. So our EBITDA, we get EBITDA here. We get total debt. Our total debt is pretty simple. It's just loans. By the way, accounts payable, this is our liability, but that's not our debt. So we don't call it debt. Now we can calculate TD over EBITDA ratio. Total debt over EBITDA, and we get an error, of course. Here I can do it the following way. If error, then just put a dash. But that's a simple version of this formula, because actually there are two other things to check in this formula. And we can make this check more complex. First, what if my project is started, but this is just initial period of our operations and my EBITDA is negative? Should I calculate debt to EBITDA? I think I shouldn't, right? So I could actually check here the sign of EBITDA instead of using this number. And another thing, what if this period is not a year, which is exactly the case for the first period? If it's not the year, then we will have an error in our calculations, because total debt to EBITDA is a ratio calculated based on annual results. But we have 6 months, for example, here, right? So if it's not annual result, let's correct the formula. We use 12 months over the amount of months in our period. That will give us this part. If the period is year, so it has 12 months, and for the first period, it will get us 2. Okay. It will do nothing for our first period, because anyway we have zeros here, but technically this is a more correct formula. Okay, we still have zeros here because we don't have any debt for now, but later we'll have some numbers here. And let's check, by the way, our format. Let's make it, for example, this way. Okay, this is the first parameter. We do nothing with this parameter in our calculations, but it's important to have it in the model, because analysts and bankers will look at the parameter. Another parameter is more important, our DSCR. We start DSCR with CFARS, cash available for debt service. Then debt service and then debt service coverage ratio. Again, here is rubles, and that's times. Okay, cash flow, cash available for debt service. Where do we get it? It's cash from operating activities minus interest paid plus cash from investing activities. Yes. The second, debt service. Debt service is our interest paid plus repayment of debt. Got it. And we can put minus sign here because in our financial reports, debt service will be negative. So for this number, we can change this, the sign. Now, for DSCR, we can calculate DSCR only if both cash available for debt service and debt service are positive numbers. So we can make it this way. If and this, oh, sorry, equal, yeah, and this one is positive, and this one is positive too, then the formula is pretty simple: CFARS over debt service. If not, just a dash. And again, format for that will be like this. Well, okay. Now we have this parameter, and I will add one more line here. Required DSCR. We can actually add, maybe it's better to do it. Yeah, no, I will remove it from here. We will add that to our loans. Well, now we have all the data to calculate our loans. And now we return to the project sheet. But we start not with the loan, but with our equity. Owners' contribution. And the shareholders' capital. Owner's contribution is something that we just use as input data. So we mark it as input data. And the shareholders' capital consists of what we had in the previous period plus the owner's contribution of this period. As I said, we know that the shareholder invests 2 billion rubles in this project. This is equity. And now we can just link these two lines to our financial reports. In our financial reports, we have cash flow and equity inflow. Equity inflow is equal to what the shareholder invested in the project. Our balance sheet, of course, doesn't balance now. And the owner's equity in the balance sheet is equal to what we calculated for the shareholder's equity. Everything is in balance. So we presented all our information about equity in our financial reports. Okay, now the loans. For the loans, we start, well, let's start with the name of the loan. Just our long-term loan. We start with the name because in many projects you have several loans. One loan for example, for equipment, another loan for working capital, and maybe some other items. So sometimes you have several loans in one project. For this loan, we will do the following. First, proceeds from the loan. Second line, repayment. Then we should have outstanding debt, right? But to calculate it with more understanding of what we're doing, I will create now two lines for outstanding debt. First is outstanding debt. I will call it during the period. And the second will be outstanding debt at the end of the period. Why did I do that? Because I have a very interesting question to answer. If, for example, in 2023, I will show that I got 1 billion rubles as debt, should I calculate all the interest payments based on the assumption that I got this money on 1st January? Or, in this case, of course, I will pay interest for the whole year, for the whole amount received with this loan, right? And if I presented some repayment in 2023, should I believe that this repayment came at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and should I subtract this number from interest payments, or I still pay interest for the whole amount before I repaid this number, right? So this is a big question, and that's important to see exactly what we're doing with this question. So that's why I will calculate two numbers separately. I will explain you how I treat them. And then after that, I need interest payment, right? But before I have interest payment, I should present my interest rate. So the next line is interest rate and then interest expense. Well, this is my loan. Here's percent. These two lines will be my input data. That will be my input data as well. And I will calculate outstanding debt the following way. Outstanding debt during the period, I will say that, okay, that's what I had at the end of last period, plus proceeds. The number at the end is equal to what I had during the period minus repayment. If I calculate it this way, that means that if I have some new loan, then I will pay interest for the whole year or for the whole period for the amount I got from this loan. But if I put repayment of this loan in the same period, then I still have outstanding debt for this period, and I will pay interest for this year. I will stop paying next period, in the next period. But for this period, I will have all the interest payments. So my assumption is that all proceeds from the loan come in the beginning of each period, and all repayments go to the end of the period. This is how I calculated it here. You could do other assumptions, but you should be careful with assumptions you make. Now, this is our percents. We said that our interest is our interest rate is 10%. We can simply link all the other numbers to the first cell. We don't have debt right now, and the interest paid is equal to outstanding debt times interest rate times period length over 12. So, for example, if we have a loan here, we pay just for half year, but from the next period, we will pay for the full year. Okay, this is how we calculate the loan, right? And it looks like I'm ready to put these numbers in my financial reports, right? But no, I will not do that. Instead of putting a link to this loan, I will do it the same way as I did it for all the other assumptions in my project. I will add total pot, and I will repeat all the lines here. By the way, the best way would be to name those lines exactly as we did it in our financial reports. proceeds from borrowing, repayment of debt. Now, outstanding debt at the end of period is called in our balance sheet loans. Let's go. Loans. And for interest expense, we used in the income statement exactly interest expense. Why I do it this way? Because if later I will add more loans, I will need to change something only in this module. I will not change anything outside the module. That's why I always create these subtotals at the end of the module. Okay, now it's just a link. This one, loans is outstanding debt at the end of period, because in our balance sheet we use values for the end of the period. And next, numbers are set. Okay, so if I got something from the loan, now I can link my financial reports to this loan. In the income statement, I have interest expense. It's minus what we presented as interest expense here. Then here, interest paid is in my cash flow statement again. The same link. Proceeds from borrowing is just proceeds here. And the repayments is the link with minus. Let's check our balance. Oh, something wrong. Yes, we haven't put the loan here. Outstanding debt. Oh, I haven't created it. No, I created it here. Loans. Everything fine with the balance sheet. That means that we made everything we had to do. Well, so now we have a complete model, and we can now put the schedule for this debt in our payments, and we'll get all the finance for the project. The problem is that we have to do it manually. And it's very inconvenient to jump from our cash flow statement and our project sheet to find a correct number, especially because, look, for example, I have, let's remove it. And let's see how much money we need in the first period. We have cash minus 2,242 million. Okay, what if I get 242 as a loan? Will it be okay now in the cash flow? No. Why? Why do we have this minus? Because after I received some debt, I started paying interest for this debt. And that's why I still have negative numbers. So first, if I try to put my loan manually, to put my loan schedule manually, then I will have to go back and forth between my financial reports and my project assumptions. And the first thing I'll do, I will add some additional information right here to avoid this time spending movements. So cash flow status. Cash at the end period. And cash at the end of period is just a link to my cash at the end of period here. So now I don't need to go to my financial reports to see what's going on there. And the second is DSCR, because as I said, DSCR is very important when we calculate our repayment schedule. DSCR will be a link to our analysis sheet here. Okay. So now if I still work manually with my schedule, I can do it at least much quicker. What can I do? Something like this for the first period. In the second period, I still need money, maybe about 3 billion rubles, more. Yes. Then something like this number here. Okay. Now my project started and I can repay my debt. How much money I can repay on 2025? I have 500 million. Can I repay 500 million? If I repay 500 million, then my DSCR is even less than 1. It's absolutely impossible. Maybe 200 million. Oh, it looks maybe 100. 100 looks more acceptable, but actually I would probably just ignore this year, because if I'm going to have 1.5 as my DSCR, that I have nothing to repay for this year. From the next year, before any repayment, I have DSCR 3, so probably I have a lot of money to repay. Let's try it with 500, maybe 600, even 700. Yes. Oh, let's make it 650. And so on. This is the way I work with my schedule, my repayment schedule, if I do it manually. Let's just make a simple schedule. So we could repay more starting from here, for example. Right? It's even too much. We need just, yes, we're there. So we repaid the project, the loan, but the problem was that we did all that manually, and that that takes time. We still don't have numbers here exactly at 1.5. So it would be good to have a formula to calculate the best possible schedule for this debt, right? So the next step for us is to create those formulas, but that will require some changes in the model, some changes in our approach to calculation. And the main problem for us, the main reason why it's so complicated, those automatical calculations, is the fact that the amount of money we need to finance the project depend on the amount we got as a loan in each period. So that creates a circular dependency. The more money we got as a loan, the more money we need. So a simple formula cannot be created. We will create a formula with circular dependencies. And now let's make a break for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Let's make it till 10 to 8. Okay, it's 9 minutes. And after the break, we'll continue with this complicated formula. Okay, let's continue. I must apologize in advance. I tried to get our break exactly to expected delivery, but it looks like the delivery will come several minutes later. When they come, I will pause for 1 minute and we'll continue then. Okay, let's return to the model. Now, what if I want to calculate for the first, as the first step, to calculate my proceeds exactly as I need them? How would I calculate them? They equal to this negative cash at the end of period, right? But, or positive. But let's remove for now those payments. But cash at the end of period depends on proceeds from the loan. So to make this formula possible, first, I should go to Excel parameters, to options, to the second part, formulas, and make sure that this option is checked. Okay, and one second. This this issue with delivery now comes. I will pause for 1 minute. Okay, we continue. Well, so I have this option checked. So now circular dependencies are possible in my Excel file. You should be careful, by the way, with things like that. That makes your model a bit unstable, and you can see an error message from Excel for models like that, because Excel uses this option not at the level of each file, but at the level of application. And that means that if I open now this model, and then I open many other Excel files, just regular files with regular formulas without circular dependencies. In all those files, Excel now have this circular dependencies option on. And it doesn't have an error if you have any real unnecessary circular dependency in your other formulas in other models. But if you open a file, a regular file without any circular dependency, and in that file this option was switched off, then when you open your file with circular dependencies, instead of normal calculations, Excel will show you an error message. So if you use circular dependencies in a financial model, then you should open this model with all other Excel files closed. Otherwise, they will not work. Okay, we have just one file opened, so that's okay. And now we can build a formula. What will be that formula? Our proceeds from the loan are equal to negative number here. So if I have minus 2 2,242,000,042, that means that I need this money. But that's not enough, because when this number will be in my cash inflow from the loan, then cash at the end of period will become 0. And when it becomes 0, this 0 goes to my loan. So this is how circular dependencies work. So another part I should have here is plus proceeds from borrowing. So what I already have as a loan plus what I need as a loan. And by this formula, we calculated exact number that we need to get 0 here, cash at the end of period. The problem is that this will work in the first period, this will work in the second period, will work in the third period, but we get a problem in the fourth period, because we have positive number here, and that converts into negative number in our proceeds from the loan. But we want to have proceeds and repayment as 2 separate lines, right? So we won't do it with this formula. Instead, we will add maximum from debt and 0. And now it works. Okay, our loan will have now a drawdown schedule exactly as we need. If we change anything in the project, our loan will be changed to have enough money to finance this project. So this first part was pretty simple, and we can now actually make it, instead of input data, we will make it just calculated numbers. Okay, with our repayments, we have a bit more complex formula. First, how much money could we use could we have for repayments? First limit we have. Let's add some lines. I will calculate it step by step to show you the formula. We could put all the formula in just in one cell, but I will do it in several lines. First limit we have cash available. Cash available to repay debt is equal to cash at the end of period. And let's say that this number is always positive. So that if we have a negative number, we understand that we cannot use this money to repay debt. Okay, this is what we have to repay debt. The second limit is that we cannot repay more debt than we have. So we cannot repay more than outstanding loan, right? Outstanding debt. Our outstanding debt is here during the period. And the last limit is maximum payment based on DSCR. And let's put our DSCR ratio, target DSCR ratio here. So we understand that we cannot repay more than that can be repaid with DSCR higher than 1.5. Now, how we calculate DSCR? First, we take CFOTS CFOTS is used to pay the debt and to pay the interest, right? So cash available here will consist of DSCR minus, I use plus sign because I will use link to the cash flow statement, and it's negative here, minus what I paid as interest. So this is the maximum available amount of money. Again, if it's negative, there's nothing to discuss here. So we remove all negative numbers, and this number should be divided by this target ratio over this number. It's fixed, it's always from column B. Let's check what we have. Okay, so this is the maximum amount we can use for repayment. And now I will delete the line and I will add here the formula. It's minimum of these three. Something's wrong here. I've forgotten about something. 1 second. I've forgotten that this operation should be for all payments, not for CFOTS minus interest. It must be here. So maximum of this and 0. Yes. Now we have DSCR exactly 1.5 until the period when we repaid all the debt. So we didn't have debt to repay. That's why our DSCR is higher than required ratio. So now, and we can say that this is not, this is not the input data, it's just calculations. Well, and what we have now we have a project that financed with an optimal debt. This debt has this minimum requirement for DSCR, and everything's okay. We can work with this project changing the numbers. I will try one trick now. I'm not sure it will work, but let's try. Let's, for example, change some investments and check our loan. Now it's still okay. What if I change our sales, for example? And the loan is still okay. Okay, but anyway, you should be careful with things like that. What's dangerous in this formula? The problem is that in each period, my formula calculates with circular dependencies, calculates both proceeds and repayments. And after some changes, sometimes that can happen that those two formulas go into conflict with each other. In this conflict, the proceeds formula will get more and more money from that, but the repayment formula will repay those money. It happens with some mix of project parameters, but if it happened, it's very hard to get rid of that. If you have situation like that, if you see that your formulas calculate crazy numbers for the loan, then you can do the following. You can add another flag. Proceeds or repayment. This flag will be like 0 for periods when you expect that the loan will have drawdowns of money, and 1 in the periods when you expect repayments, and then you add here another check if the period is for proceeds, then we calculate our proceeds. Otherwise is 0. If the period is for repayment, then we calculate repayment. Otherwise it's 0. With formula like that, you will never have a conflict between those two formulas. But you have some manual work here, because you have to decide, will you expect in this period new money from the loan, or you will repay the loan? But that's not a big manual work, so you can do it quickly. Okay. That's it. With this part, we've made everything we plan to do for this loan. Now we have a complete financial model with all financial reports, with finance for this project, with everything. And the next lecture, we will discuss DCF analysis. We will discuss how we analyze the project, what we do with this financial model, and so on. And for now, we've done with the lecture part. And if you want to discuss your model online here, you can say something, and we'll discuss it now.
Здравствуйте. Можно задать тогда вопрос по поводу модели?
Да.
У меня такой вопрос, что я строю как бы жилищный комплекс совместно с офисами. При строительстве офисов у нас есть такая система, как escrow-счета. Поэтому с бухгалтерской точки зрения компания признает выручку в момент раскрытия счетов escrow.
Да.
Поэтому если говорить про строительство именно cash flow statement, как мне его отражать? Просто, насколько я понимаю, в таких случаях в cash flow statement отражают не с бухгалтерской точки зрения потоки, а с точки зрения поступления средств на escrow. То есть как бы с бухгалтерской у застройщика их нет, а как бы с фактической они у него есть. И банк может из-за этого выдавать там больше денег, потому что он видит, что в том числе эти как бы деньги, выданные деньги, они обеспечены деньгами, лежащими на счете escrow. Поэтому вот с точки зрения моделирования, как лучше делать вот в моем случае, если у меня есть вот такая сложность в виде счета escrow? То есть либо на отдельной вкладке как-то тогда финансирование мне отразить, а кэшфлоу сделать согласно как бы принципам бухгалтерского учета, либо, может быть, какой-то еще вариант вы можете предложить?
Нет, кэшфлоу лучше сделать как раз согласно фактическому поступлению денег. Вот. А вот с точки зрения отчета о прибылях и убытках сделать отдельно расчет для правильного начисления прибыли. Моделировать отдельные escrow-счета, ну, это можно, в принципе, как бы так, ну, если делать серьезную модель, то так и надо делать. Да? Тем более, что у банка, скорее всего, с которым вы будете работать, процентная ставка будет зависеть от остатков на escrow-счетах. То есть процентная ставка
Ну,
будет...
ставка скидки, там ставка скидки есть, которая дается
Да.
как бы...
Вот, и она, в принципе, как бы в жилищном проекте, она может быть очень большой, эта скидка. То есть это очень серьезно для проекта, потому что у вас под конец остатки на escrow-счетах превышают сумму кредита обычно. И в этот момент, естественно, у банка уже риск нулевой, вот, соответственно, процентная ставка будет очень низкая. Если вы хотите...
не будет, извините, у меня просто такого не получится, потому что у меня бизнес-класс. А бизнес-класс до раскрытия escrow не продастся никак. Ну, обычно это 50%.
Ну, хорошо. Ну, вопрос в том, что если вы хотите моделировать escrow-счета, тогда моделируйте отдельные escrow-счета.
Я хочу, чтобы было правильно. То есть...
Сейчас я скажу, да? Но если это первая модель, которую вы делаете, то правильнее сначала сделать эту модель без всяких escrow-счетов. Вот представьте, что их нету вообще. Решите вопрос сначала базовый. Как смоделировать предпосылки, сформировать финансовую отчетность. Под эту финансовую отчетность из предположений, что никаких escrow-счетов нет, смоделировать кредит. Вот когда это все вместе у вас заработает, вы последним штрихом сделаете изменения в нескольких строчках. Вот просто, как бы, если вы сразу замахнетесь на сложные вопросы, получится так, что вы будете тратить время и силы на escrow счета, а у вас может быть базовая модель там в неприличном состоянии. Вот.
Спасибо.
Вот.
А скажите, дайте, пожалуйста,
перейти от прямых продаж к escrow счетам – это несложно. Это будет касаться нескольких строк.
А то подскажите, пожалуйста, как быть, если, допустим, как бы все три формы отчетности должны быть связаны, по идее, и
Да.
как бы на балансе у меня будет отражаться, если как бы я неправильно буду моделировать как бы cash flow statement, да, тогда у меня и баланс будет как бы некорректен.
Все должно быть, все должно быть логично, поэтому если вы делаете предположение, что escrow счетов не существует, значит, их у вас нигде не будет существовать.
Ну, то есть в рамках моделирования можно такое допустить, что все продажи осуществляются по ДКП до момента получения разрешения на ввод, правильно?
Да, то есть сначала сделать базовую модель того, как выглядит коммерческая сторона вопроса, да, а потом углублять ее с учетом юридических и финансовых особенностей.
Понятно, хорошо, спасибо большое.
Вот это же, в принципе, является логикой практически везде. То есть сначала делается укрупненная модель, которая задает какие-то основные характеристики, чтобы увидеть, в принципе, да, что это за бизнес. А потом на это все начинает надстраиваться, там те же самые там акционеры могут достроить потом какие-то свои интересы, там какие-то свои особенности. тонкости там, распределения денег тоже могут быть достроены. Я вот сегодня сказал о том, что мы дивиденды не моделируем, да? Но они могут моделироваться, но потом, когда готова базовая модель. Вот,
Понятно, спасибо большое.
да,
Спасибо.
пожалуйста. Так, кто-то хотел прям модель показать, да, по-моему?
Здравствуйте. Ну,
Константин, да, вы.
да, я по почте закинул. Это модель еще совсем почти не готовая. Там возникли некоторые проблемы на этапе расчета налогов, потому что у меня нефтянка. Я пытаюсь посчитать НДПИ, он получается слишком дорогой. То есть,
Слишком дорогой в каком смысле?
в
Слишком дорогой
смысле,
для вас или он не соответствует тому, что должно получиться?
он слишком дорогой в отношении, в принципе, выручки. То есть он выше, чем выручка получается.
Ну, значит, вы его неправильно посчитали, правильно?
Да, вот. В этом проблема.
Так, ну хорошо. У вас есть план добычи, да? Значит, экстракшн – это у нас как раз сама добыча, да?
Да, это план добычи, я его сравнительно линейно рассчитывал, то есть то, что мы будем до истощения в течение какого-то периода одинаковое количество нефти вытаскивать уже после завершения работ бурения.
Не, ну хорошо. Значит, смотрите, НДПИ, вот он у вас, да? Сколько-то
Мгм.
рублей за тонну, да? Вот он в
Да.
2027 году 3800 рублей
Да,
за тонну.
я потом пересчитал, там, точнее, пересчитал методологию расчета НДПИ, и выяснилось, что это не рубли, а доллары. В этом проблема.
Ну, у вас просто, значит, неправильно формула НДПИ. Вот и все.
Мгм.
Ну, соответственно, ее надо правильно посчитать.
Понятно.
Да? Ну, она как бы явно не должно получиться 54 доллара за тонну. А нет, почему?
Да.
Может получиться. В принципе,
Да,
все нормально.
я не знаю, может быть, у меня в самой процедуре расчета неверно
Нет,
то,
ну,
что...
хорошо, минуточку. Значит, это НДПИ. А доход у вас рассчитывается, исходя из цены, которая где указана?
В PNL, цена там Urals в макро находится. Там первые 4 года использовался прогноз Центрального банка.
Не, я понимаю, сейчас вы мне объясните такую вещь. Я смотрю, Urals цена такая, да, она за баррель, а там за тонну.
Да,
А где
и там
пересчет?
умножается на 7.3 уже в PNL. Там получается баррель Urals в тонну, если перевести.
Да, я понял. Вы
Вот.
помните, наверное, я на первой лекции говорил, это вот это кошмарный стиль. Нельзя ставить коэффициент внутрь формулы.
Мгм.
Если есть коэффициент пересчета, значит, должна быть строчка, которая называется коэффициент пересчета.
Хорошо.
То есть, соответственно, цена должна быть пересчитана где-то, да, и явным образом указана. Это во-первых. Во-вторых, если у вас отчет называется значит, P&L, да, то ну, вот он выглядит не совсем как P&L, но ладно.
Мгм.
Вот, но если это отчет итоговый, то в нем не должно быть вычислений. То
Мгм.
есть если надо вычислить доходы, то в этом случае тогда эти доходы надо как-то, соответственно, пересчитать. Значит, это вот что касается технических аспектов. Что касается расчета, я пока сходу не вижу, да, но не может быть такого, чтобы у вас НДПИ оказался выше доходов, потому что, ну, если цена, если все правильно посчитано, если вы просто не напутали арифметику, если
Мгм.
цена стоит на 25 год $50, коэффициент 7 – это 350,
Мгм.
а НДПИ у вас 50.
Да, ну,
Значит, вы просто напутали арифметику.
да, хорошо.
А арифметику вы напутали, скорее всего, потому что вот вы нарушаете вот это правило, да. Вот тут надо понимать, что когда мы работаем с моделями, как бы не надо преувеличивать собственные интеллектуальные способности. Они у нас у всех очень невелики. оказываются. Если мы надеемся, что мы удержим в голове все формулы, которые нужны нам в расчете, ну, скорее всего, это будет не так. Ошибок люди делают очень много. Поэтому надо сделать так, чтобы практически обнулить для себя пространство для маневра, чтобы ошибки было делать негде. Вот, соответственно, если вот есть вот эти там коэффициенты пересчета, да, вот аккуратно, шажок за шажком вы так и выстраиваете эти расчеты. Вот цена там юрлс за баррель, вот коэффициент пересчета, вот цена за тонну. Все, пришли к этому, да. Эту формулу, там цена за тонну, мы уже начинаем использовать в расчете НДПИ, да, ну и так далее. Вот, там, кстати, я чуть не вижу в расчете НДПИ, где-то цена за тонну. Ну, в общем, вот это надо тоже выстроить как бы аккуратненько, чтобы цена за тонну была там где-то в нужном месте. Я не очень сейчас понимаю даже, где она. Вот. Соответственно, вот делая вот так по шагам, вы придете к тому, что у вас, скорее всего, ошибки найдутся, и их не будет новых. Это первое, да. И второе, я всем уже, кто присылал раньше модели, об этом говорил. Сейчас говорил на лекции и повторю вам еще раз. В отношении финансовой отчетности тоже надо придерживаться вот такого пути, минимизировать возможность даже теоретическую что-то понять не так. Для этого финансовая отчетность должна быть максимально стандартной. Да?
Хорошо.
То есть если у нас в отчетности есть понятие, вот я нарисовал вот стандартный отчет, где есть EBITDA, есть налогооблагаемая прибыль, потом налог, потом прибыль. Вот так и идите. Да? Почему? Потому что следующим шагом, вот сейчас вы это доделаете, следующим шагом у вас начнутся расчеты вот этих коэффициентов, которые мы сегодня считали, там, на следующей неделе будем считать. И опять вам нужно будет, чтобы модель была построена так, чтобы никуда шагнуть в сторону уже нельзя было. Если вам EBITDA нужна где-то в каких-то показателях, то и вы, и любой, кто пользуется моделью, точно знает, где она. Она сидит в середине отчета о прибылях и убытках. Если вам нужен еще какой-то показатель, все точно должны знать, что вот если есть отчет о движении денежных средств, то вот примерно вот там, в этом разделе, эта строка уже есть. И она и есть та самая строка, которая должна использоваться в расчете. Вот это как бы с одной стороны позволяет вам меньше ошибаться, а с другой стороны это снижает требования к тому, кто разбирается в вашей модели, кто с ней будет работать. Вот, как-то так.
Хорошо. И еще тогда вопрос по поводу инфляции. Если у нас выручка в рублях и расчеты происходят, точнее, выручка в долларах и расчеты по модели тоже происходят в долларах, насколько вообще разумно использовать российскую ставку инфляции? Потому что я попытался в формуле покопаться инфляции по себе и понял, что там сокращается все.
Значит, смотрите, какая ситуация. Значит, у вас тут два фактора. Значит, фактор первый. Если, допустим, какая-то часть затрат у нас долларовая, а какая-то рублевая, да, то есть, в принципе, инфляция на нас вроде как может повлиять, да. Там в долларах одна инфляция, в рублях другая инфляция, между ними валютный курс, ну и как бы получается не здорово, да. Значит, что в этом случае возникает? В этом случае возникает такой интересный момент. С точки зрения моделирования мы могли бы смоделировать инфляцию долларовую, инфляцию рублевую и прогноз курса. С точки зрения практики, скорее всего, то, что мы напишем в этих трех прогнозах, сделает бессмысленным их существование. Почему? Как обычно прогнозируют курс, если надо спрогнозировать его на 10 лет вперед?
По-моему, как раз по инфляции это все.
Паритет покупательской способности, да, покупательной способности. Паритет покупательной способности фактически предполагает, что курс меняется пропорционально разнице инфляций между двумя валютами. Но если у нас курс автоматически в нашем прогнозе равен все время разнице инфляции между двумя валютами, мы по сути считаем, что они инфлируют одинаково. Да? То есть это то же самое, как если бы мы считали все в одной валюте. Ну, конечный экономический результат будет такой. Но эта ситуация еще не обнуляет нашу потребность в инфляции. Она обнуляет потребность в двух инфляциях и прогнозе курса. Да? Она только сильно все упрощает. Почему инфляция нам все-таки нужна? Потому что, ну, представьте себе такую ситуацию. Значит, у нас рублевая инфляция, допустим, 7%. Ну, не, возьмем долгосрочные там эти хотелки. Да? 4% рублевая, допустим, 2% долларовая, 2% значит, изменение валютного курса. То есть весь бизнес инфлирует с темпом 4%. И мы берем кредит. Или мы привлекаем акционера какого-то. И этот акционер говорит, я хочу иметь 15% годовых на этом бизнесе. Если я посчитаю этот бизнес, не заложив туда 4% инфляции, то фактически я превращаю его требование 15% в требование 19%. Правильно? Значит, мне нужно сделать одно из двух. Либо уменьшить его требования, то есть ставку дисконтирования сделать реальную, ну, в реальных показателях. Либо все-таки внести инфляцию 4% на все. Значит, это один фактор, который у вас есть. То есть он говорит о том, что точно не надо планировать все по отдельности, но, вероятно, надо планировать инфляцию вообще или переходить к ставкам реальных показателей. Теперь второй фактор. А у вас вообще что в любом проекте является главной компонентой, которая определяет, в какой валюте мы хотим считать проект?
Ну, наверное, выручка и обязательства.
Выручка, да. Ну, обязательства на втором месте. Вот, на первом месте, как правило, выручка. У нас выручка не просто в долларах. У нее еще один фактор. Она не инфлирует. Она не инфлирует, а ведет себя черт знает как. Потому что это нефть. Да? То есть у нас, возможно, у вас есть какой-то прогноз, да? У вас неизбежно есть какой-то прогноз, без какого-то прогноза вы не сделаете модель. Там, можете вы его доказать, не можете, сомневаетесь, не сомневаетесь, другой вопрос. Все равно у вас модель просчитана с некоторым прогнозом. И согласно этому прогнозу цены на нефть ведут себя не так, как цены на многие другие товары, то есть имеют сегодняшнюю цену и дальше растут с инфляцией. Нет. Они имеют некий свой путь. В вашем случае вы говорите, они упадут до $50 и будут держаться на $50 там, все последующие, сколько там, 15-20 лет. Да? 20 лет. Вот. А здесь нет инфляции. Правильно? То есть мы решили, что у нас доходы не инфлируют, а ведут себя каким-то странным там образом. При этом с затратами со своими мы тоже не можем на 20 лет вперед ничего четко сказать, потому что это у вас разработка одного месторождения, правильно?
Да, ну это
Да.
скорее бурение просто, буровые работы на одном месторождении.
Ну, доходы-то у вас формируются за счет дебета, правильно?
Да.
Да. А что мы знаем о том, как ведут себя затраты? Да? Ну, помимо того, что мы знаем, что доходы ведут себя не так, да, они как бы неравномерные. Мы сначала получаем больше, потом меньше, там, ну и так далее, выкачиваем. Как бы. Вот. Так мы еще и про затраты знаем, что они тоже меняются. То есть на каждый баррель добытой нефти у вас затраты будут сложным образом меняться. Короче, к чему я это веду? К тому, что в вашем случае инфляция – это очень далекий фактор. Реальные факторы, влияющие на доход, это ценовые прогнозы, это прогнозы по изменению дебета скважины, это прогнозы по изменению того, значит, там, какая у вас себестоимость извлечения, ну и так далее. Вот. Соответственно, глядя на это, мы понимаем, что мы можем просто плюнуть на инфляцию. она не является фактором, создающим неопределенность, меняющим экономику этого проекта. Ну, как бы ее влияние есть, но оно теряется на фоне других гораздо более весомых факторов. И это то, что делают, соответственно, очень часто с нефтяными проектами. Не трогают инфляцию. Вот в вашем случае просто забудьте о ней.
Понятно. Так, еще я хотел спросить по поводу выручки. Там я пока что модель предполагаю, что мы просто продаем по курсу Urals, но не знаю, стоит ли туда закладывать чуть более высокий курс, чем Urals, потому что происходят расчеты по предоплате, и получается что-то вроде форвардных контрактов по итогу. Таким образом.
Ну, нет, не надо погружаться в эти детали. У вас все-таки задача сейчас не в том, чтобы изучить экономику нефтяного проекта, да, ну, первичная в нашем курсе, да, а в том, чтобы построить гармоничную модель. Если проект вы упростите, это не помешает вам в построении гармоничной модели. А вот слишком сложное просто отвлечет вас от действительно серьезных вопросов. Потому что так-то, конечно, ну, надо тогда поднимать вопрос, там, да, давайте вводить, значит, это самое, параметры там, обводненности, там, давайте выяснять, в какой точке мы продаем нефть, да, где происходит передача. Мы как бы кто? Мы продаем ее от скважины, ну тогда это же не... Юрлс-то продается не на скважине, правильно? Вот, значит, тогда надо выяснять, там, либо у нас затраты появляются, связанные с транспортировкой, либо у нас цена не такая. Но важно ли это нам все? Я думаю, что на это сейчас на все можно закрыть глаза, взять базовые характеристики этого проекта и постараться сделать так, чтобы сама модель была идеальной. А достраивать в ее операционные характеристики новые и новые параметры, это потом на работающей модели будет гораздо проще.
Хорошо. А вот касательно транспортировки, я еще хотел спросить, мы же можем предположить, что, допустим, есть какая-то нефтяная компания, которая согласилась за свой счет провести к нам трубу, и чтобы мы транспортировали это все через трубу им, ну, то есть продавали этой нефтяной компании.
Да, вы не только можете, а так оно и будет. В смысле, ну, так и считают, потому что ну, не тянут же отдельно трубу к каждой скважине, правильно? Вот, значит, соответственно, отдельно рассчитывается разработка нефтяного поля и отдельно считается эффект от каждой скважины. Вот у вас в данном случае эффект одной скважины.
Хорошо, спасибо. Еще по поводу кредита хотел спросить. При расчете ставки по кредиту я решил использовать как раз как build-up model, взял американскую безрисковую ставку, потом туда спред за индустрию внес, и дальше, я не знаю, там, наверное, нужно еще какой-то спред внести, который будет компании, ну, не компании привязан, потому что это мелкая.
Минуточку. А почему вы ставку по кредиту рассчитываете через build-up model?
Ее так не получится рассчитать, да?
Ну, ставка по кредиту – это ставка по кредиту, да? Нет, ну и как бы ее можно посчитать по принципу там, от облигаций от каких-то, да? Ну, как-то сложно, честно говоря. Билдап модели, ну вообще все эти модели, там такие многоэтапные, они используются для определения ставки дисконтирования. То есть эти модели в основном применяются к equity. А что касается кредита, ну правильнее все-таки просто прикинуть, какую будет ставка кредита для подобного проекта.
Хорошо.
Это так. А ставка кредита будет, там, ну, я не знаю, там, если это там, представьте, что это нефтяная компания какая-то там, серьезного размера, ну, просто и берите стоимость облигаций любой публичной нефтяной компании.
Мгм.
Если речь идет о частной компании, ну, какой-то там небольшой, да, ну, опять берем цену облигаций нефтяной компании, накидываем пару процентов.
Мгм. Хорошо.
Вот так. То есть
Спасибо.
нам не нужна, как бы нам, зачем нам там американские там трежери облигации, если мы знаем, сколько стоят облигации нефтяных компаний, просто напрямую именно от цены облигаций нефтяных компаний.
Мгм. Хорошо.
Вот. Я просто подчеркну, да, в чем отличие, почему билдап нам нужен для equity? Потому что мы никогда не знаем, какая цена капитала, equity капитала торгующихся компаний. Вот если берем условный Газпром, берем, вот мы знаем, сколько стоят акции Газпрома. Но из этого ничего не следует. Какая ставка дисконтирования у тех, кто покупает акции Газпрома по этой цене? Понятия не имею. Это нам ни о чем не говорит. А можем ли мы знать, сколько будут стоить облигации «Газпрома»? Там их нет, по-моему. Ну, если есть, да? Ну, какие-нибудь там облигации РЖД сколько стоят? Конечно, мы каждый день знаем с точностью до сотых процентов, сколько стоят облигации РЖД. Почему? Потому что денежный поток, под который существует цена облигаций, фиксирован контрактом. Поэтому если мы знаем цену, значит, мы точно знаем, какая ставка дисконтирования заложена в эту цену. А вот денежный поток акционера никаким контрактом не фиксирован. У каждого аналитика в голове свои мысли относительно того, каким он будет в будущем. И поэтому из цены акции мы никак не можем угадать, какая правильная там рыночная ставка дисконтирования. И тогда мы начинаем заниматься какой-то аналитикой и говорить, что ну, давайте посмотрим, сколько стоит капитал, там, сколько стоит заемный капитал, накинем какие-то премии на это и прикинем, какая будет справедливая цена. Вот разница. То есть, когда мы говорим о заемном капитале, не надо никаких косвенных вычислений, потому что мы напрямую знаем эту цифру.
Хорошо.
Вот,
Спасибо.
да. Так, еще у кого-то с моделями есть вопросы? Если нет, присылайте модели. Соответственно, можем обсуждать их по почте. Если там будем сталкиваться с тем, что какой-то там тупик в вопросах, возникает необходимость больше обсудить, то просто будем делать короткие зум-сессии и обсуждать конкретные модели. Вот. Очень надеюсь, что к следующей пятнице от большинства я уже увижу модели, потому что нам надо будет хотя бы несколько итераций пройти, чтобы прийти к хорошей модели. Тогда на сегодня все. Всем до свидания.